Okay, gang, we want to start to get to our appropriate groups. So come on in and take a seat. You might be better off closer to the front to read this when I write with my absolutely crummy handwriting. Then again, maybe you couldn't read it anyways. So I always had to stay after school to practice penmanship. Didn't do any good. Calla? Got a question. Okay, you don't know how fortunate you are today. You're getting 2 for the price of 1. Calla Jean is going to be my teaching assistant.
And I haven't heard the lesson yet, so I'm going to blow it.
No, it'll be easy. Now, is that thing? Yeah, it says the Lord's Prayer. We are going to have the Lord's Prayer, part of it today, the Lord's Prayer plus. So our subject is prayer. And we want to take a look at 2 types of prayer. One, praying alone. I mean, it's one-on-one. And we're going to start with that. So can you write down praying alone?
Do you have a preference as to color?
No, as long as it shows up. And they all write well. I checked that earlier. So praying alone.
Title?
For right now. Yeah, we're going to erase it. Big, so that people can see it. Big and heavy. Does it have a heavy? There you go. Well, I hope you can read that. Good. Praying alone. So, what verses can you give in the Bible? And that's why Calla Jean's up here primarily. She's going to write these things, not write out the verse, just the reference, of an example of someone praying alone. Yes, you count. Okay, Lee, Matthew 6:6. Maybe I will do the reading because is this thing being live streamed? You know, I feel sorry for the people that have to put up with the lighting on that thing, etc. Matthew 6:6, an example of praying alone, and I will do the reading then so that it can be easily heard. Jesus, the Lord's Prayer. And when you pray, go into your room and shut the door and pray to your Father who is in secret. And your Father who sees in secret will reward you. And the you there is singular. So, Lee, excellent example. What else? Praying alone.
Well, I'm not going to give you a verse. I'm just going to tell you it happened again and again. Jesus went up into the mountains and prayed alone.
Okay, let's try Mark 1:35. And this is one of, Calla Jean said there are many examples of this, and she's right.
Mark,
1:35. And rising very early in the morning, while it was still dark, he must have been on daylight standard time, he departed and went out to a desolate place. And there he prayed. And that's Jesus. Mark 1:35. So here we got from the Master himself 2 examples of praying alone. But he's not the only one. So what else can you mention? You got any other verses that you can come up with of people praying alone? And Old Testament is fair game too, not just new. Yeah. For example, this is in Matthew 26. And we want to take a look at verse 37, for example. Matthew 26. It's in the garden. And verse 37. Okay, I'll read 36 and 37. And Jesus went with them, the disciples, to a place called Gethsemane. And he said to his disciples, "Sit here while I go over there and pray." And taking with him Peter and the two sons of Zebedee, he began to be sorrowed and troubled. Verse 38. He said to them, "My soul is sorrowful even unto death. Remain here and watch me." And then he went, in verse 39, a little farther and fell on his face and prayed. So he's up with the disciples. Judas is gone, so we'll call it the 11. He leaves the main group of the 11 and takes Peter, James, and John and goes with them a little further, and then leaves them and goes off. So this is an example, really, of both. We're also going to talk about group prayer later, of praying alone, and at least others could observe him with this one. That time he got up early in the morning and went out to a desolate place. He was probably truly alone. But this way, others could observe him, but he was praying alone. They were not praying. As we know, they were sleeping. They conked out. So good example. Okay, now so far, we got everything related to Jesus. Did anybody in the Bible ever pray alone? Harvey? Okay, Daniel, and that was 6, 10 through 12. Daniel praying alone. Okay. Okay, you got a reference on that, Chris? Hannah, this is the Old Testament. Hannah 1, not Hannah 1. What book is that? That's 1 Samuel 1:9. There is no book of Hannah. 1 Samuel 1:9. Can you read that for us? And every indication we have is that she was praying alone. And this was about being, I believe, about being childless. Other examples of people praying alone. Kalajine.
What about Peter when he went up on the roof and prayed and God put down the things that told him he didn't have to follow all the laws in the Old Testament?
Yes, that's Acts chapter 10, 1 through 16. Now, we're not going to read that whole thing. But Acts chapter 10, 1 through 16. Let me read just some of them to you. Excuse me, this is chapter 10, verse 9 and following. So a man named Cornelius had a vision, and the next day, as messengers from Cornelius were underway to Peter, Peter went up on the housetop about the 6th hour, which is noontime, to pray. And he became hungry and wanted something to eat, but while they were preparing it, he fell into a trance. So all of the indication was, they used their roofs back then in those houses. And so he was up on the roof, apparently alone. The others were in the house, and that's where they were preparing the meal. So this is a good example, Acts chapter 10. And then we could also look at Acts chapter 10, 1 through 8, and that's Cornelius. a centurion. And about the 9th hour of the day, Acts chapter 10, verse 3, he saw a vision, an angel of God come and say to him, Cornelius. And he said, what is it, Lord? And the angel said, your prayers have been answered. And apparently Cornelius was praying alone at that time. The 3rd or 9th hour, I think we read, which is about 3 in the afternoon. Anybody else you can think of? Shelley. Yeah, Hagar in Genesis 21. What verse is that? Yeah, verse 21:16. And she, Hagar, went and sat opposite of him, the son, a good way off, about the distance of a bow shot. And a bow could really, Dave, you know how far a bow shot can go. And she said, let me not look on the death of the child. And she lifted up her voice and wept. Excellent example of praying alone. Yeah, he was up there for 40 days. You would think that there would be. And he was alone, yes. You want to write that down? We'll just put Moses Sinai. That's enough. There's another one in Galatians. Oh, I made a typo here in my little handout that you're going to get later. But in Galatians chapter 1, verse 16, there's an example of the Apostle Paul. Galatians 1:16. Got this beautiful new Bible, and it does everything but turn pages. So Paul talks about what happened at his conversion. The conversion is not in Galatians, it's in Acts. But he says, God was pleased to reveal his Son to me in order that I might preach him among the Gentiles. I, Paul, did not immediately consult with anyone, nor did I go up to Jerusalem, but I went away into Arabia, which is kind of a desert area. So apparently he went off by himself for a while and had quite a bit of consultation with God about this new role in his life. Anybody else? Praying alone. Well, I'm going to take a picture of what Calagene just did here, so I can make a list of that, because you've added things to the things that I had. Okay. Good, you can erase that. So you can guess what's coming next. We're going to contrast praying alone with praying in groups, praying with others. A group of people praying and not alone. So Calagene can just write group at the top if you want. Yeah, no, that's the eraser doesn't do so well. Hope the stuff, yeah. Okay, so a group praying. What examples can you give? Barb? Have we got a specific verse we can give there? Let's see if we can find one, because I think that's probably legitimate. Acts chapter 1 might have something for us here. Like I said, this new Bible is fantastic. It's got all the verses listed separately and not run into each other, but the pages don't turn so well. Yes. Acts 1:14. The disciples, Jesus is gone now, and the disciples devoted themselves to prayer together. Group prayer. Dave? Acts 2:12. Okay, here's what mine says for 2:12, if I have it right. They were amazed and perplexed, saying to one another, what does this mean? Is that what the verse you meant? Oh, wait a minute. That's not 2:12. Is that 12? Okay, Acts chapter 12, verses 1 through 2. Let's take a look at that. Acts 12, 1 through 2. This is a great, great story. Herod had killed James, the brother of John. And then we read in verse 3 of Acts 12, and when Herod saw that it pleased the Jewish people, he proceeded to arrest Peter also. So Peter's in jail. He was going to be killed. And an angel appeared, verse 7, and a light shone in the cell, struck Peter on the side and said, get up. The chains fell off, and the angel said, put on your sandals, we're going to get out of here. And verse 9, he followed him out, and then he was outside and free. In verse 11, Peter said to himself, or came to himself and said, I am sure the Lord has sent his angel and rescued me. And then verse 12, which is the one that Dave meant, when Peter realized this, he went to the house of Mary, the mother of John, whose other name was Mark, where many were gathered together and were praying.
So what's the reference?
Acts 12, 12. 12, 12. Many were gathered together and were praying. And then when a servant girl came out, found Peter there, was so excited she didn't open the gate, ran back to the others and said, hey, Peter's there. And they said, you're out of your mind. They've been praying for this very thing. It happens, and he says, you're crazy. Well, that's the way we are as people, right? What other examples of people praying in a group?
Two in jail in Philippi. They were singing and praying, and
Oh, that must be Acts 16. You're talking about, was it Paul and Silas in prison?
I believe so.
Let's see. Now, they were on their way to a place of prayer, and they met a slave girl, and so that just tells you something. They weren't going to pray alone. But then when they were in jail, at midnight, Paul and Silas were praying. This is Acts 16:25. Acts 16:25. At midnight, Paul and Silas were praying and singing hymns to God. This is a small group, but what did Jesus say? Where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name. So a small group prayer, but that's fine. Nothing wrong with that. What else? Harvey. Yes, absolutely. How about 5,000 people? That's Mark 6, 39 through 44. Jesus and a rather large group, 5,000. Now, they weren't all praying, but there was prayer there in front of a group. Andy was first. Yeah. James 5:14. Is anyone among you sick? Let him call the elders for prayer. And in the Bible, a church always had a plurality of leaders. None of this Lone Ranger one-man show business. was always a plurality. This is a good time to refresh ourselves. Ryan, who are the elders right now?
Who are the elders? Myself, Pastor Ed, Carl Lorba, Randy Chastain, Mike Howell.
Okay, Mike Howell, Randy Chastain, Carl Rohrbaugh, and the Ryan troublemakers. No, the Tafilowski troublemakers. No, just kidding. So in the New Testament, there's always a plurality of leadership in the church. Okay, what other examples? Linda. Yeah, let me read verses. This is 2 Chronicles 20, verse 5. Jehoshaphat stood in the assembly of Judah in the house of the Lord and said, O God of our fathers, you rule over all the kingdoms. In your hand are power and might. And we have I have the distinct and feeling. Meanwhile, in verse 13, all Judah stood before the Lord with their little ones, their wives, and their children. So this was a group situation. Starting with what? 20, 2 Chronicles 25, and take it through 13 for the reference. Any other examples of group prayer? Yeah, right. That'd be a good one. In fact, turn to Daniel chapter 2, 17 through 18. Daniel 2, 17 through 18. This was when Daniel was threatened, and he went to the house and made the matter known to, verse 17, Daniel 2, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, and those were Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and told them to seek mercy from the God of heaven. So that sounds like a group setting. Take a look at also Acts chapter 13. Boy, a lot of stuff here in Acts. Acts 13, verses, I'm going to read 1 through 3. Acts 13, 1 through 3. Now there were in the church at Antioch prophets and teachers, Barnabas, Simeon, who was called Niger, Lucius of Cyrene, Manaen, a lifelong friend of Herod the Tetrarch, and Saul, who later became Paul. And while they were worshiping and fasting, the Holy Spirit said, set apart for me Barnabas and Saul for the work to which I have called them. And after fasting and praying, they laid their hands on them. So I think you get the feeling. But there's one other thing we need to look at. We started off, not quite yet. We started off with Lee in Matthew 6:6. And when you pray, go into your room, shut the door. Quiet, alone, you. And there's the word for you there. You know, in English, I can say, you go to the store, pointing at Chris. Or I can say, you go to the store, meaning you plural. But so in English, we say you, and is it singular or is it plural? Well, in other languages, it's clear. And in the New Testament Greek, it's very clear. That in Matthew 6 is singular. But we've also got the other things in the Lord's Prayer where we find you are plural. And there are other places in the Lord's Prayer. Let's take a look at that where we have a plural you. Matthew 6. And all we have to do is find the you verses. You or we. Verse 11, give us this day our daily bread. Forgive us our debts, as we have forgiven our debtors. Lead us not into temptation. For if you forgive others their trespasses, your heavenly Father will forgive you. And Jesus also said, right after verse 6 that Lee mentioned for us, shut the door, pray to your Father in secret. Verse 7, and when you pray, and that's plural, and your Father knows what you need before you ask him, verse 8, that's also plural. And then pray then like this, that's plural. So most of the Lord's Prayer is you, plural, or we, us, our.
7 through 1.
Oh, you can go 7 through 14. And so that one verse that Lee quoted, we kind of tend to emphasize that and forget the other stuff. That most of it is emphasizing a you. Now I want to take a picture of this, Carla.
Hang on. This thing looks up.
Does it ever? In fact, one wonders if the eraser is of any use at all.
I don't think so.
Okay, I'm just going to take a shot of this.
Erasers are good for chalk. No, I was talking about this kind of a board.
Okay, now, we've had 2 sessions so far. 1, praying alone. 2, praying in a group. Yeah, please. And the next thing we want to list, what opportunities are there at Foothills Fellowship or in your life for praying in a group? Now praying alone, do you need me to hold this?
Doing something
I
wrong.
think this needs to be tight. Okay, let's try that. It's got to be a little crooked, but go ahead. You tell me when you're finished erasing.
Crooked is the word for it.
So, praying alone, we don't have to really discuss what opportunities you have. You might be praying alone right now. Oh, God, let this lesson end. You know. So, we can pray. Even if someone says kids can't pray in school, they can go to school and pray alone silently. I mean, praying alone, we don't even have to think about. But okay, here's what I'm going to do, Cal. Does that look about? Yeah, it's better than it was.
This is, okay.
I got to tighten this screw. Okay. Now, what opportunities, first of all, at Foothills, are there for praying in groups? And Calagene will list these. Sunday morning before service, we meet in what used to be the pastor's office, and it's even got a blow heater in there to warm things up. Ryan, can one have that heater on and the baseboard at the same time? Does it go boom?
Oh, no, that's fine. It's the lights and the heater that you have to choose.
Really? So one could have the baseboard heater on and the blow heater?
Yeah.
Oh, well, remember that for the next time.
It was better this morning.
It was, well, it was warmer outside. Okay, church before, what other opportunities at Foothills? Linda? Vespers, yes.
Which is coming up.
Yes, Thursday, December 1st, 7 o'clock. Dave? Yeah, men's Bible studies. I'm sure the women have women's Bible studies where they also pray. What else? How about care group? When our care group gets together, we open with refreshments and fellowship, and then we have a time of prayer before going into the Bible portion. What else? Yeah, right. Even on the phone, you
Yeah.
could pray with someone.
So how?
Why don't you just put down informal?
Okay.
Are any of you involved in other ministries outside of the church that are not an official church thing and you pray there? MOPS, okay. Andy? Set free prison. So you can put down MOPS, other ministries that, so their opportunity. Dave? Mm-hmm. Wow. Okay. Is it a Zoom thing? Okay, just, yeah. Authentic Life Church, of course, is very close to the intersection of Coal Mine and Pierce, but it's further east a little. And we are now supporting their food bank. I mean, we've ceased with our food bank and supporting them because they've got more resources than we do. All right, so we've seen all of these examples and probably others that we could list. Praying in groups. I'm not going to ask for a show of hands with this. I don't need an answer that Calagine's going to write on the board. I hope all of you somehow have an opportunity to pray in groups and not just alone. And you're all welcome to the 8:30 Sunday morning prayer, and if we get too big for that room, we'll find another place to go. Over to Ryan's house. No. Yeah, Vespers, yeah. And we also had something like the Thanksgiving Eve service. Giving praise to God is a form of prayer. It's not always just, prayer is not always gimme, gimme, gimme. Okay, so we've had 3 portions to this lesson. 1, biblical examples of praying alone. 2, biblical examples of praying in group. 3, what opportunities do we have with footnotes? Now, you never guess what the 4th is. We are going to pray as a group now. And not me or the group, but I would like to have at least a few of you pray. We're not going to spend half an hour listing prayer requests. We're going to pray. And you can just feel free to just jump right in. Boom. Dive right in. So let's do that. And I will close, and I might pray a couple of times before I close when I think that the time is appropriate. Just pray for anything or praise God, whatever. Let's practice what we're preaching. some kind of healing. You think of Kim Brockman and his leg healed. You think of Mike Pareca just this week wrapping up some radiation treatments. Think of my next appointment in February. And there are others, many others. And we just pray that you would stretch out your healing hand and heal.
Well, and speaking of hand, we pray that you would completely heal Dave's hand, Angela. Father, I think of Copeland's with Gavin leaving after Christmas. This may be, and I don't know, maybe Garrison will come this year, I don't know. But they're watching their kids grow up and leave. I pray this would be a special Christmas. I think of the Schmidts about to return, and I haven't heard whether Lynn's mother, is doing well. She was in hospice. Don't know if this will be a Christmas without her. There's just a lot going on. I think of Hansbergers. I think of Joey still being in jail. And I think of the fact that I learned at the picnic that Andy and Joey, no, it's John was in jail. Andy and Joey both have autism. I think of Tim and Janet as they're getting ready to retire, and it's a blow. I just pray that you would really move in their lives and would just give comfort to all of our missionaries, whatever the change is that's coming.
We pray also for Jim and Christy, that you'd watch out for them there in Asia. We would pray for the country of Taiwan, that you would protect that country from their not so benevolent neighbor to the west. Pray for Allison Niles, that her support would come in so she could get back to the Philippines. Father, we thank you for this time to pray together, and help us to seize other opportunities, including this coming week of Vespers, in Jesus' name. A couple things to wrap up. Yes, I do. Callie Jean was recruited at quite literally the last second to do this today. And she didn't know what the lesson was. So I thank you for being able to jump in like that.
A teacher can always write on the board.
Joe, can I just make one clarification about Vespers? Normally Vespers would be the first Thursday, but there's no Vespers in December, and that's because of the Thanksgiving Eve service and the Christmas Eve service.
Oh.
It was a big demand on Taylor in the evening, so.
Oh, I'm glad you said that.
Yeah, so stay tuned for January,
Okay.
but you can still pray.
Yes, I still pray.
Maybe even more so.
Right.
Okay, I have 5 copies of this article, which was in Christianity Today. Yes, Jesus told us to pray in secret, but he also prayed with his friends. And this was the basis of today's lesson, this article. So 5 copies, thank you, Ed. Who would like them? You're ready. Okay.
Yes, please.
Very short.
I think Barb wants one too.
Very short. Just 3 pages of text. The last page is about 1 sentence. So thank you for coming. Let us practice what we preach, and have a great rest of the week. And thank you, Ryan. No Vespers. Okay. You're dismissed. Oh, one thing